welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at some really interesting patterns in research collaboration.
Okay.
Specifically, who teams up with whom in the research world,
Right.
and what that means for research as a whole.
Okay.
You might be surprised to learn that gender plays a much bigger role than you might think.
Yeah.
And not always in the way we expect.
That's true. We often hear about women supporting women in male-dominated fields, but the data suggests something a little different.
Oh, really? Now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so this deep dive is based on this really amazing data set called the Polish Science Observatory.
Okay.
Imagine a massive database with details on the publications of over 25,000 Polish university professors.
Wow.
Spanning an entire decade.
So we're not just talking about a small sample size here. This is like a real bird's eye view.
Exactly. And what it reveals is that men are much more likely to collaborate with other men. And what's even more interesting is that women are actually less likely to have female co-authors, especially early in their careers.
Wow. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah.
So the whole birds of a feather idea seems to apply more to men in research than women.
It seems that way.
What can you explain that?
Well, that's the fascinating question, isn't it? It might point to some underlying biases in the academic system.
Right.
Maybe even unintentional preferences for what feels familiar.
Okay.
Or it could be something about how men and women approach networking and collaboration differently.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um,
It's like that old boys club effect that we see in other industries.
Yeah.
So this pattern of men sticking together, that's pretty widespread.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent.
But does it change at all depending on a researcher's age?
It does. The data consistently shows that as men get older, this tendency to collaborate with other men actually increases.
Oh, why?
But for women, it's the opposite. As they advance in their careers, they become slightly more likely to work with other women.
Interesting.
It's still far below the rate that men collaborate with each other,
Yeah.
but the shift is definitely noteworthy.
Huh. Almost like women have to break into that inner circle first.
Right.
Before they can start forming those collaborations themselves.
Yeah.
Does the type of research they do play a role as well?
Absolutely. In fields like computer science and engineering,
Okay.
which are historically male-dominated, all male research teams are incredibly common.
Yeah.
It's almost like a self-perpetuating cycle.
Right. It's like an echo chamber.
Yeah.
What about fields where there are more women?
Interestingly, in fields like psychology and the social sciences,
Okay.
where there's more gender balance, the gap in collaboration patterns is less pronounced.
Okay.
But even there, the tendency for men to work primarily with other men still exists.
It sounds like regardless of the field, there's still a clear lean towards male partnerships.
Unfortunately, yes.
But this next finding really threw me for a loop.
Okay.
The research shows that papers published in more prestigious journals tend to have mixed gender author teams.
Right.
Why would that be?
That's a great question, and it raises some really interesting possibilities.
Yeah.
Does this mean that diverse teams produce higher quality research?
Yeah.
Or could it be that there's bias in the peer review process where mixed gender teams are viewed as more rigorous or innovative?
It's almost like there's a hidden advantage to diversity,
Mm-hmm.
even though the data shows that it's not the norm.
Yeah, it's a strange paradox.
And speaking of norms, this pattern isn't just limited to individual researchers.
Right.
Even the type of university plays a role.
You're right. The study found that in top-tier, highly competitive research universities, male collaborations are even more prevalent than the overall average.
So it's not just individual choices. The very structure of the research environment might be unintentionally reinforcing these patterns.
Exactly. It suggests that the most competitive environments might be inadvertently disadvantaging women,
Yeah.
particularly early in their careers when those strong networks are so crucial.
Right.
And it makes you wonder if these trends are so pervasive in Poland,
Yeah.
a country with relatively high female participation in academia. What does that tell us about the global research landscape?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So we've covered the overall trend, the impact of age and research field,
Right.
and even the role of the institution.
Uh-huh.
What does this all mean? Why should our listener care about these patterns in research collaboration?
Well, it really underscores the need to look beyond just those individual choices
Okay.
and acknowledge the systemic factors that might be shaping these collaborations.
Yeah.
We can't just assume that everybody has equal opportunities to network
Right.
and build those crucial partnerships.
It makes you wonder what those systemic factors could be, like what's actually driving these patterns
Yeah.
beyond just personal preference.
Well, one factor that stands out is the historical dominance of men in so many research fields.
Right.
It's not surprising that those long-standing structures and hierarchies could contribute to a kind of boys' club mentality, even if it's unintentional.
So even as more women enter these fields, they're navigating a system that wasn't necessarily designed with them in mind. It's almost like trying to break into an exclusive club where you don't know the secret handshake.
Exactly. And that can create a sense of implicit bias where people unconsciously gravitate towards what feels familiar and comfortable.
Right.
It's not necessarily about overt discrimination, but more of a subtle preference for the known.
But beyond the historical context, could there be something about the dynamics of collaboration itself that plays a role? Do men and women approach teamwork differently?
Yeah.
And could those differences be contributing to these patterns?
That's a great question. And there is some research that suggests men and women might have different communication styles or levels of comfort with competition. For instance, women might be more inclined towards consensus building or collaborative decision making, while men might lean towards being more assertive or taking risks.
So even subtle differences in style could lead to friction or miscommunication within those mixed gender teams. And over time, it might just feel easier to stick with colleagues who have similar approaches.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that these are just generalizations.
Right.
Not every man or woman fits neatly into these categories.
Of course.
But it highlights the importance of being aware of these potential differences and how they might affect team dynamics.
Especially when you layer those dynamics on top of the existing gender imbalances in so many fields.
Exactly.
It creates a kind of feedback loop where the more men collaborate with each other, the stronger those networks become, making it even harder for women to break in.
Exactly. And that's why raising awareness about these patterns is so crucial. We need to recognize that these aren't just isolated choices or preferences. There are systemic forces at play, often operating beneath the surface, that shape these collaboration patterns.
So what can we do about it? How do we move beyond simply acknowledging the problem and start taking action to create more diverse and inclusive research teams?
Well, one important step is to create more opportunities for mentorship and networking across gender lines. This could involve formal programs that pair senior researchers with junior faculty from different genders, or even informal initiatives that create spaces for researchers to connect and collaborate outside of their immediate departments.
So it's about actively building those bridges, both within and across different areas of research, to encourage more interaction and collaboration between men and women.
It could be as simple as organizing cross-disciplinary seminars or workshops. Or even just encouraging social gatherings where researchers can mix and mingle and get to know each other outside of their usual circles.
But it sounds like it's not just about bringing people together. We also need to address those underlying systems and structures that might be perpetuating these patterns.
That means taking a hard look at everything from hiring and promotion practices to how research funding is allocated. We need to ensure that women have equal access to resources, opportunities, and recognition for their work.
And that requires a real shift in mindset.
It does.
Moving away from that old boys club mentality. And embracing a culture of inclusivity and equity.
It's about recognizing that diversity isn't just something nice to have. It's essential for fostering creativity, innovation, and excellence in research.
It's about creating a system where everyone feels valued, respected, and supported regardless of their gender. But let's not forget that this isn't just a Polish issue. These patterns of gender homophily in research have been observed around the world.
You're absolutely right. This is a global phenomenon. And it raises the question, if these trends are so pervasive, how do we scale up these solutions? How do we create lasting change on a global level?
That's the million-dollar question, right? We've uncovered these patterns. We've talked about potential causes. But now it's like, okay, how do we actually explore those solutions? How do we get from awareness to impactful change? Not just in Poland, but globally.
It's a challenge, for sure. But definitely not insurmountable. There are some encouraging initiatives happening around the world that kind of offer a glimpse of what's possible.
I'm all ears. What are some of the promising approaches that you've seen?
Well, one strategy that's gaining traction is for funding agencies to require research teams to demonstrate a genuine commitment to diversity as part of their grant applications.
So it's not just about ticking a box
and
adding a token woman to the team.
Exactly.
It's about fostering an environment where everyone feels valued and respected.
Right.
And where those diverse perspectives are actually shaping the research itself.
Precisely.
This is about holding researchers accountable.
Yes.
And making diversity a core criterion for funding, not an afterthought.
Exactly.
Like that. What else?
Some institutions are adopting blind review processes for grant applications and publications, which can help to minimize unconscious bias. By removing identifying information about the researchers, the focus shifts solely to the quality of the science itself, not the gender of the scientists behind it.
That's brilliant. It levels the playing field and allows the research to speak for itself.
Yeah.
But these are mostly institutional level changes. What can individual researchers do to contribute to a more inclusive research environment?
There's a lot we can do on an individual level. Senior researchers, for example, can take a more active role in mentoring and sponsoring junior women in their fields, opening doors and amplifying their voices. They can also make a conscious effort to invite women to join their collaborations and make sure that their contributions are recognized.
So it's about being an ally, not just in words, but in actions.
Exactly. And for all of us, it's about challenging those subtle biases we encounter in everyday interactions. You know, if you see someone talking over a female colleague in a meeting, interrupt and give her space to speak. Call out sexist language when you hear it. These small acts can create a more inclusive and welcoming environment.
It's about creating a culture where those small acts become the norm, not the exception.
Exactly.
It sounds like true change requires both top-down and bottom-up approaches.
Well, it does.
Working together to really shift the landscape.
Absolutely. And the great news is that this movement towards a more diverse and inclusive research culture is already gaining momentum.
That's great.
The more we talk about these issues, the more awareness we create. And that's the first step toward meaningful change.
Your deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. We've gone beyond just analyzing data. You know, we've really sparked a conversation about the challenges and potential solutions for building a more equitable research environment.
Remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. We encourage you to keep exploring this topic, to share what you've learned with your colleagues, and to be an advocate for change in your own research communities.
This has been a really inspiring deep dive. You know, if these patterns are so pervasive, even in a country like Poland with relatively high female participation in research, it just highlights the urgent need for this awareness and this action on a global scale.
It does.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep diving deeper.